Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the Mormon Movie Reviews, where LDS movie lovers belong. My name is D-Baze, and today is September 21st, and this is episode 23, and we'll be reviewing Cipher in the Snow, 1974. Running time is 21 minutes. Synopsis: when a teenage boy dies unexpectedly, his math teacher is asked to notify the parents and write the obituary. Although he was the boy's favorite teacher, he hardly knew him. Shy and ostracized, the boy was considered a cipher, an unknown number in a class roll book. As the teacher unravels the mystery of what led to the boy's death, he commits himself to not letting others suffer the same fate. Now, this particular film is available for purchase still today through the BYU Creative Works office, and it's part of a 5-in-1 set where you have The Gift, The Phone Call, Emmett Smith's Story, and a couple of others. This review works best if you have seen this film before, though it is certainly not required. Cue up the subtitles here. I'm sorry about the film quality, but this is the best quality I could find. Now, here, this boy is off to the side. He seems to be a loner. He seems to be by himself. And as a matter of fact, I think we found our protagonist here, Court Leroy. He's only known for this one film. This is the only film that he ever played in, so he is a one-hit wonder. Now, it appears that we're going to be heading off for school here. He's still all by himself. He's not by anybody else. He seems to be a real loner. And he's the last one on the bus. He seems very reluctant to get onto the bus. He's the last one. And we have some really ominous music that is being played here, and it really sets the tone. I mean, imagine if this music was swapped out for Huey Lewis's Power of Love. You'd have an entirely different film. So no one really wants to sit by this boy.
Just one time I'd like to beat him to school.
Okay, now we have actually found the headliner or the star of the show, which is Robert Bridges, and he stars as Frank Collier. Now here's his IMDb page. He was born in 1938. He's an English actor, and he's known for a couple of films in the 70s and 80s. Again, very ominous music here. And something seems to be the matter.
I'm sorry, I just gotta get off.
What? But you're going to school.
What is wrong? Yikes! Oh no!
I don't know. The kid tapped me on the shoulder, kind of apologetic-like, and asked if he could get off. So I let.
Okay, so terrible. I wonder what is wrong with this boy. Now, a bus driver, you just can't stop on a bus route like this. You pick up a child and you have to take care of that child until they're arrived at school. You can't just let them wander out in the middle of the frozen highway in the middle of nowhere. If you look on the side of this bus, it says that it is the South Summit School District. So that's what we get to see. So we can pinpoint where Cliff lives because the South Summit School District is really a real school district that actually exists. The South Summit School District currently has 6 schools in it. South Summit High School, middle school, elementary, and then Silver Summit Academy. That is a charter school, but is basically, it's all taking place here in Camas, Utah in 1974. You can see where Camas, Utah is in the state of Utah. This is a very, very small town. Southwest Summit County, Utah is part of the Utah Metropolitan Statistical Area. It's north of Salt Lake City. You can see it on the map here. The population for the time frame of this film is in 1970, the census said there was 806 people and there's 1,000 people. So I guess we can say that there is, I don't know, about 900 people only 327 families are residing in this city during this particular film. The school district right now has 6 schools in it, but if you go back 30 years at the time of this movie, I'm going to bet you that there was only 3 schools in this town: an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. So we're talking about a very, very small town community environment. I used to think that it was an amazing coincidence that his teacher was right behind him. But let me tell you, my wife is an educator, and the buses and the teachers, they often get to school at around the same time.
Let him.
What's the matter with him?
He's dead, isn't he?
The bus driver says he's dead, isn't he? Isn't that a little early to be jumping the gun about? I mean, he was alive literally 30 seconds ago. I think it takes longer than 30 seconds for someone to die.
Call an ambulance.
Now, would that not be a good time also for that teacher who has been trained in CPR? It's a requirement now in the state of Utah to take CPR classes as a teacher. I don't know if it was back then, but this would be a good time to start something. Now, the ambulance is on their way to pick him up, and we get to see some credits along the way here, too. I tried to look at the license plate for this ambulance, which kind of looks like the Ghostbusters Ecto 1. It looks like it's a Utah plate, but I can't tell you that for certainty. But anyway, we know this is set in South Summit. Now, the BYU Motion Picture Studio, they adapted a short story into this movie in 1973, and the film was produced by Wetzel Whitaker and Keith Atkinson, with a screenplay by Carolyn Pearson. Now, the Cipher and the Stowe, this was actually a short story, and it was written by Gene Miser, an Idaho teacher, counselor, and guidance director, and was first published in the 1964 National Association of Arts Journal. You can read the short story today. It's not very long. It's only 2 pages. You'll see quite a few of the quotes that are from the actual story make it into the BYU's film adaptation of it. Now, it won first prize in the first Reader's Digest NEA Journal writing competition. Seems like a time to give Cliff a little bit of space here. Like I said, this has been used a lot in anti-bullying initiatives and used for moral education purposes. How about a little bit of space? I guess somebody did call the ambulance. Really looks like a Utah license plate to me.
What happened?
I'm not quite sure. I came up behind the bus and made a non-scheduled stop, and he just came running out.
Is he dead?
What happened? What do you think?
Move back. Come on, you kids, clear out of here, will ya?
Now the paramedic here, he does 1 weak chest compression, and that's it. He doesn't do mouth to mouth. He doesn't do anything else. Everyone should be cleared back. They should be really attending to this boy. They're barely doing anything. How about some mouth to mouth? How about some rapid chest compression needed? How about somebody say a prayer? How about a priesthood blessing? Consecrated oil. This is in Utah. I mean, he cannot be dead already. That's literally impossible. I mean, that's it. They cover him with a blanket, and that's it. How about you run an IV? Get some pure oxygen going. Hit him with the defibrillator. Call the bishop. Do something. Save this boy. So we've come to find out that Frank here is the boy's teacher.
Hello.
Go right in, Mr. Collier. Mr. Hard's
Are you
expecting.
sure he was a student here?
So we also come to find out that his name is Mr. Collier. His name is eventually known as Mr. Frank Collier. And we're going to go see Mr. Mars, which is the school's principal.
Yes.
Hello, Frank. Neither of you knew the boy.
No. Ned, I think he was in my math class last year.
The man on the left here is the school bus driver, Mr. Schneider.
Peggy, if you have the Evans file, would you bring it in, please?
We also come to find out that apparently the boy's name is Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider? But thank you for what? For improperly dropping off a vulnerable child in an icy, snow-infested highway without permission on the side of a busy highway in the middle of the wintertime? Thank you. How about please surrender your passport and secure legal counsel?
It's funny. The boy never even said he felt bad.
It's funny. I'm sorry. What's funny about that? I don't get the joke, Mr. Schneider. This looks like a typical BYU motion picture studio set.
Here it is.
Oh, thanks, Peggy. Could you take care of these, please?
All right.
What time is that board meeting?
You're late for it now, sir.
Typically, a board meeting would be talking about a school board meeting. It's incredibly unlikely to hold a school board meeting during the school day. Most school board members are community volunteers with jobs and responsibilities, and board meetings are not held during the day, so the parents and other interested community members can more easily attend. However, this is a very small community of perhaps only 900 people, and the sudden death of a student might necessitate an emergency meeting, so perhaps it's not as far-fetched as we thought.
Frank, I thought you said you hardly even knew the boy. What do you mean? Well, he's written here that you're his favorite teacher.
His favorite teacher, me?
That's what it says.
Well, there were a couple of instances when I helped him with his homework, but...
At least you remember talking with him. That's more than anybody else.
The 2020 census estimates that 23% of the U.S. population is enrolled either in primary or secondary schools from the ages of 3 to 18. So 23%. We established already that this town has about 900 people in it. So there are less than 200 children attending school in this entire town. You only have 200 children and you don't even remember talking to one of them, and it's just okay. It seems like the boy in this film, come to find out his name is Cliff Evans. It seems like he's about 13 years old in the film.
Did he have a drug problem?
Drugs in Camas in 1973. It's very unlikely. This is just everything about this is very strange.
I don't know. I told you I didn't spend that much time with it.
I see.
Wish I could be of more help.
As a matter of fact, you can. Somebody has to contact the parents.
Oh, now, wait a minute. You're the principal. Don't you think you or Mr. Carlin...
I've got to be in a board meeting all day.
You're in a school district that only has 200 children in it. Remember, this is South Summit School District in Utah. Not only would the teacher not contact the parents, the principal in a school district of that size wouldn't even contact the parents. It would be the superintendent and the president of the board who would be contacting the parents. Remember, about 50 kids witnessed Cliff's death. Did they not tell Cliff's parents that their son was already in an accident of some sort and on his way to the hospital? It was just a few minutes after the ambulance arrived. They should have been on the phone to Cliff's parents already. Your son has been involved in a tragedy, some kind of an accident. He's on the way to the hospital. But now it looks like Cliff is dead and they still haven't talked to the parents. Remember, this is a small town. Everyone in the town would know that there was a sudden death of a school child. It'd be all over the town in a matter of minutes. If you've ever lived in a small Utah town like I have, everyone knows everyone. This would never be kept under wraps. You would need to get to those parents as soon as possible. When you read Miser's story, this loophole that the filmmakers left into the film, it gets answered because in her story, the parents do not have a phone. But that is extremely unlikely in 1974 Utah. It seems like this board meeting is not about Cliff's death. And I can think of very few things that would be more important than a principal taking ownership of this tragic accident. The entire school district has 200 children in it. That would be split among 3 schools: elementary, middle school, and high school. So each of the schools that we're talking about only has 60 kids in it. So we're talking about a principal with a stewardship of 60 children, but he doesn't even remember Cliff?
Besides, I don't even remember seeing the boy. You at least knew him.
Well, what about my classes?
We'll cover your classes.
Priorities, man. Priorities.
And incidentally, we'll need a small obituary for the school paper.
Shouldn't the parents handle the obituary? Especially since the teachers don't even remember him?
You can use my office. Peggy will be glad to help. And, by the way, I'll arrange for a delegation from the school to attend the boy's funeral. And thank you very much, Frank. I really appreciate this.
I really appreciate this. I really appreciate you doing something that should absolutely be my job. It's a teacher's job to teach. It's an administrator's job to be the administrator. Do your job, Mr. Mars.
Any ideas?
Well, here's the address. 4315 Randolph Road. Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Tucker.
Stepfather?
Mm-hmm.
Cliff was a good boy.
I'm sure he was.
Never complained.
Here we get Bruce Kimball. He's playing the part of the stepfather as Harry. He was probably the most famous actor in this entire film.
Said he was sick.
Never said nothing about anything since the day I moved in. I give that boy everything I could, but he could just never catch on. If he wouldn't have been so dumb, he'd have told us he wasn't feeling good.
That's outrageous.
Wasn't dumb. I'm sorry Cliff's dead.
You don't sound like you're sorry that Cliff's dead. And this boy has only been dead for a few minutes, and this is their parents' reaction. It's horrible.
And he could never do one thing right, and you know it. Mister, I've got all this work to do around here.
What work?
The other day, when we had that snow,
Beautiful shot of the 22 Willamette. That basket just made him top scorer.
Oh, Harry here, he's knocking back a cold one. I think Harry needs to get a missionary referral card.
you shovel them walks.
I forgot.
Oh, you forgot. I tell you to go out and shovel those walks. You come in and you say, I forgot. Where you been for 2 hours?
Just went for a walk.
Obviously, Cliff does not enjoy being at home much, which is why he likes time on his own away outside in the nature.
For 2 hours? Dummy went for a walk for 2 hours. Doing what?
Just thinking.
Oh. What's that in your hand there?
It's a willow. It's already bedding. It's not even spring yet.
A willow.
There's a lot of symbolism in this particular scene. Cliff's stepdad, Harry, he represents those who don't care about other people, who only care about themselves. And the willow, it represents Cliff's struggles. The willow is trying to succeed through adversity, through the winter, against all odds.
I ask you to please go out and shovel the walks. And you spend 2 hours thinking about willows.
When Harry knocks the willow out of Cliff's hands, it shows that the stepdad doesn't want his son to succeed because the willow represents success, of thriving, of being a successful person. And Harry's getting physical with Cliff.
When are you going to start using that head of yours for something besides keeping your ears apart?
That's the second beer in this scene already.
Stupid kid. And she says he wasn't dumb.
I should have spent more time with him.
So you didn't? Now let it be.
Why are these parents not at the hospital right now? Why are they in their own home?
That's what you've always wanted, isn't it, Harry?
Hey, where are you going?
To see my son.
What about my breakfast?
At least she tells him off in the long run. I'm thinking of two words that I would really like to scream at Harry right now. They're both pretty short words, but they are effective and to the point.
How's it coming?
Well, Cliff Evans was Caucasian, never legally adopted by stepfather, and has a steady list of bad grades.
That's the obituary?
That's the record. As far as school goes, he appears never to have done anything. No clubs, no sports, no activities at all.
No friends or students that knew him?
None that admit it.
You're kidding.
Nope. From the record, Cliff was a real zero, a cipher.
Oh, I don't envy your job.
You know, though, there's something I just can't get out of my head. Cliff Evans appears to have started out a normal, healthy, and happy boy. Look, first grade teacher, sweet, shy child. Second grade, timid, eager, wants to learn.
He's a nice-looking boy.
Here's a poem he wrote in the second grade.
My poem about frogs by Cliff Evans.
The sweet
I like frogs. They sit on great big logs. They jump real high up to the sky. I wished I could jump high like a frog.
Now, the frog here, Cliff wants to jump high in the sky to escape his difficult home life and his loneliness at school. He finds peace and contentment with nature, willows, frogs. Being by himself feeds his soul. He sets the frog free, happy to let it continue its life away from the evils of Cliff's home life. Now, Cliff Evans, he represents children who come from broken homes and become lost without positive guidance, and the feeling of being loved. Now, the color palette here is very warm. It's vibrant. It contrasts Cliff's icy and eventually dark death. Now, even though no one is around, Cliff, he doesn't feel alone here. Yet, when he's on a bus surrounded by dozens of his peers, he feels isolated.
Doesn't sound like he was always a zero.
No, he started out just about like every other kid, but
Well, what happened? Messed up home?
I'm sure that was part of it, but there's got to be more. 3rd grade. Cliff won't talk, uncooperative, slow learner. It's about the same time Cliff's mother and father are having trouble.
And that's also about the same time my parents got divorced, when I was in 4th grade.
Good. That's much improved.
Now, Cliff longs to be free.
That's right. You're doing
He's looking
fine.
longingly at the window. The outside is calling him. And what a great teacher. She's checking on each one of her students.
Cliff, what are you daydreaming about today? Oh, you've always got your mind on something else. Cliff, you've got to try harder. You know you're the slowest one in the class.
I take it all back. That's abominable. Try harder. That's not the kind of feedback that really helps students. It's far too general. What is Cliff particularly struggling with? Give him specific guidance for improvement.
Do you want some help after school? Do you want me to have your parents in for a conference?
They won't come.
Why not?
They're getting a divorce.
I mean, it appears that Cliff's parents' imminent divorce is affecting him in profound ways.
People seem to live up to what other people think of them. Slow learner. The 4th grade teacher says low achiever.
Now, people seem to live up to the expectations that others put on them. I'm going to come back and discuss that more. That's called the Pygmalion effect. I will discuss that more at the end of the film.
Doesn't mix well with other children. I've seen how that happens.
Now, this playground seriously looks exactly like my Utah elementary school playground. Again, he's alone. No one will play with him. Nobody will love him. Now, there's only going to be one class per grade in a town of this size. So you would go through school with the exact same peers year after year, which means that if you're the odd boy out, that could last for an entire childhood.
Hey, you're not alone. That's our cement head. Yeah, I just want help. We don't need no help.
More people are being physical with Cliff. Now, Cliff, he is slightly smaller than his fellow classmates, and something that I can personally testify to you that it leads to bullying.
Hey, that looks like. Yeah, it does. Hi, Cliff Evans. Looks just like old Cliff, except he isn't so ugly. Yeah. There you go, Cliff. There's your hat, looking nice and warm.
Now, in this scene here, Cliff, he is the snowman. He's faceless. He's cold. He's alone. His hat, he's transforming into an inherently temporary, fleeting. He's just fleeting. They're both alone on the icy playground. Cliff and the snowman, they are one. Now, even though the recess bell has rung, Cliff, he is in no hurry to return to his dreaded desk, his insensitive teachers, who mostly ignore him, and his peers, which ostracize and bully him. He gratefully steals a few extra moments alone outside. Now, as a former teacher, I can tell you how easy it is to ignore someone like Cliff because he's quiet. He does not cause disruptive problems in class. He's someone who can easily slip through the cracks. Now, Cliff, he's putting the face on the snowman because he doesn't want to be faceless. He wants others to know him. And the musical scoring through this section, it is very sparse, lonely. It's in a minor key showing the bleakness of Cliff's reality. Now, if you read the exact story, from the story we read, not the film, Ms. Mitzer says, I could guess how many times he had been chosen last to play sides in a game, how many whispered child conversations had excluded him, how many times he hadn't been asked. I could see and hear the faces that said over and over again, You're nothing, Cliff Evans.
Are all the rest of his reports like that?
It's all beginning to fit, isn't it? Once he was labeled, everybody else followed. Stubborn, daydreamer, slow learner, dull. Not one of them looked past that third grade remark to find any real answers.
No wonder Cliff had a problem.
Do you have my 8th grade report?
Yes, it's right there.
In today's schools, if Cliff had those kind of remarks from his teachers, he would receive an IEP, also known as an individual education plan, which would require the school and or the school district to provide extra resources and or tutoring to help him with his education. Those resources that are necessary to educate that child, much of those resources come from the federal government. However, IEPs were first introduced into U.S. public schools in 1975, and that would be shortly after this film's release. The teacher here, Mr. Collier, he makes reference about Cliff's 8th grade report. So if we're in the 8th grade and we're in the winter time frame, that makes Cliff perhaps maybe around 13 years old.
Introverted. Lacks ambition, socially unskilled. Well, doesn't look like I helped any more than the rest, does it, Peggy?
What do you mean?
You have a son, don't you?
Yes.
Suppose he lived in a broken home, was never legally adopted, was totally ignored. How would he feel?
It's not a very pleasant thought.
Now add to this 6 or 7 hours a day spent in school where he gets the impression that he's slow and dumb.
Oh, Mr. Collier, I don't think teachers intend to treat students that way.
Maybe not consciously, Peggy, but I wonder.
Cliff's parents divorced when he was around 9 years old. We saw that in an earlier scene. And we don't know when Harry remarried Cliff's mother. But in Utah law, you can't adopt a stepchild unless you've lived with the child for a year, though a judge can waive that requirement. So just merely the fact that he's not adopted, that doesn't necessarily tell us anything. Now, we never get to see Cliff's biological father in the short. And again, I can tell you from personal experience that not being around one's biological father during these very formative years has tangible and often negative consequences. Mr. Collier in this film represents a caring and thoughtful teacher, but he also represents the part of the audience's conscience. He's the conscience of the film.
Pretty late.
I am absolutely furious at this so-called principal. How dare he abdicate his very important responsibility?
Just been looking through the Cliff Evans file. We got the coroner's report.
Wait a minute, is this the same day? How could you get a coroner's report on the same day? That is not logical. So I have this information from several websites that under normal circumstances, it takes about 6 weeks for a full coroner's report to come through. However, if a toxicology report is requested from the coroner, it can take 3 or 4 months. And remember, back to the earlier scene, the principal was asking whether Cliff used drugs. So given the highly unusual manner of Cliff's death, a toxicology report seems warranted. In addition, why would the coroner send the cause of death to the school administrators? The coroner would send it to the parents. Now, I suppose it is possible that the parents passed on the report to the school. So apparently, this can't be the same day. So I guess you can retract what I just said about the principal, mostly.
They were really puzzled. Said there was nothing wrong that they could tell. Heart just stopped beating.
So first of all, what is heart failure? Because this is a tragic situation. I want to understand it better. Heart failure, also called congestive heart failure, is a condition in which the heart can't pump enough blood to meet the needs of the body's organs. The heart keeps pumping, but not as efficiently as a healthy heart. Usually, heart failure reflects a progressive underlying heart condition. Heart failure often occurs in childhood in children with congenital heart defects. Other medical problems that can cause heart failure include, but are not limited to, an enlargement of the heart valve disease, cardiac arrhythmia, chronic lung disease, anemia, viral infection, high blood pressure, hemorrhaging, overactive thyroid, postoperative complications, or medical side effects. Cliff seemed, for all intents and purposes, in those flashbacks, he never had any problems, he never had any sicknesses, he never had any issues. So, what are the symptoms of heart failure in children? The most common symptoms are visible swelling in the legs, ankles, eyelid, and face, and occasionally abdomen. Didn't see that. Abnormally fast breathing. Cliff went on a lot of walks. He was out in nature. He seemed to be in fine condition. Shortness of breath or labored breathing. No, he was jumping around like a frog with no problem. Fatigue? No. He wasn't falling asleep in school. Nausea? No. Falling asleep when feeding or becoming too tired to eat? Lack of appetite? Weight gain over a short period of time? Cliff was extremely thin. Cough and congestion in the lungs? No, he was playing outside in the cold with his friends making a snowman, no problem. Sweating while feeding, playing, or exercising? No. Breathing difficulty with activity, especially while feeding, walking, or climbing stairs? Far from it. Loss of muscle mass? Okay, well, he was a little thin. Failure to gain weight? Maybe just a little bit. Change in skin temperature and color. What we're seeing with Cliff, that does not match reality. A heart condition like this would have some kind of serious symptoms that would be involved with it.
Heart failure. That's okay for the record, but there's more to it than that. What? I think Cliff was erased. Little by little.
There's some interesting symbolism in this scene. Again, Mr. Collier is our conscience. He starts erasing the chalkboard like the school principal and Harry erased Cliff's life.
Family, schoolmates, teachers, everyone reduced him to a zero.
And then Mr. Collier wipes his hands of the chalk, kind of representing like Cliff's family, teachers, and classmates. They just wiped their hands of his death.
Finally, he just went away.
Low IQ.
Right. This year it was listed as 83, way down. But in the third grade, it was recorded at 106.
Price, a professor at the Wellcome Trust Center for Neuroimaging at the University College of London, and colleagues tested 33 healthy and neurologically normal adolescents aged 12 to 15. Their IQ scores range from 77 to 135 with an average score of 112. So from that particular scholarly article, it does seem that Cliff was a little low, though not exceptionally low.
Okay. A negative environment can significantly lower an IQ over a period of time. But what's that got to do with the boy's death?
Even shy, timid children have resilience. It takes time to break them. Gradually it happened. And I helped.
Lines of dialogue are coming directly from the story of Ms. Miser that we referenced earlier.
Me, his favorite teacher.
Oh, I did the best I could to show Cliff how to solve mathematical problems. But like everyone else, and the things that really mattered, they're making him feel like a worthwhile human being.
I kept subtracting.
Frank, a lot of people are treated worse than Cliff, and they survive.
Some do, some don't. Do you remember that study on babies in orphanages?
Yeah.
They were given all the food and physical care they needed. The mortality rate was incredible.
It appears here that Mr. Collier seems to be referencing this particular case of 30 years ago in Romania, which deprived thousands of babies of human contact and what became of them. Past Christmas Day was the 30th anniversary of the public execution by firing squad of Romania's last communist dictator, who ruled for 24 years. In 1990, the outside world discovered his network of child gulags, in which an estimated 170,000 abandoned infants, children, and teens were being raised. Believing that a larger population would beef up Romania's economy, Ceausescu had curtailed contraception and abortion, imposed tax penalties on people who were childless, and celebrated as heroine mothers women who gave birth to 10 or more. Parents who couldn't possibly handle another baby might call their new arrival Ceausescu's child, as in, let him raise it. He's talking about Romania in the 1990s. But what about the claim here that he said that the mortality rate was incredible? This was a study that was conducted by Charles Nelson. The implications of early experience for children's brain development, behavior, and psychological functioning have long absorbed caregivers, researchers, and clinicians. In 1989, fall of Romania's Ceausescu regime left approximately 170,000 children in 700 overcrowded and impoverished institutions across Romania, and prompted the most comprehensive study to date on the effects of institutionalization on children's well-being. Romania's abandoned children, the authoritative account of this landmark study, documents the devastating toll paid by children who are deprived of responsible care, social interaction, stimulation, and psychological effort. That's not necessarily a study, but it was eventually studied in a more clinical way. So, launched in 2000, the Bucharest Early Intervention Program was a rigorously controlled investigation of foster care as an alternative to institutionalization. Researchers included 136 abandoned infants and toddlers in the study and randomly assigned half of them to either foster care or leaving them in the Romanian institutions, which conditions remain substandard. So this was a real test. Both groups were assessed for physical growth, cognitive functioning, brain development, and social behavior. Data from a third group of children raised by their birth families were collected for comparison. So the study found that the institutionalized children were severely impaired in IQ and manifested a variety of social and emotional disorders, as well as changes in brain development. However, earlier an institutionalized child was placed into foster care, the better the recovery. He makes the claim that the mortality rate was incredible. That is not the case. Is that the children who were in the study, the 136 that were divided in half, those who were institutionalized, they had severe behavioral and emotional problems and poor long-term outcomes, even though they were getting adequate food, hygiene, and medical care. But because they had woefully few interactions with adults, their life outcomes were significantly different. Once you understand that study, you can understand the lens through which this film is being given to you, because they're treating Cliff here like one of those abandoned, so-called abandoned or institutionalized Romanian infants from the 1990s. At Cliff's exact age, I was raised for a time in a family other than my own, along with other foster children. And I eventually went on to have 2 foster children of my own.
Well-fed babies turned their faces to the wall and died.
No.
When the doctors finally caught on, they prescribed, along with the food and blankets, a little attention, a little love.
The doctors were testing the premise. This just fundamentally misrepresents what Dr. Nelson's study was all about.
Cliff held on for a long time. Finally, he just turned his face to the wall, too. Just turned his face to the wall and died.
It's kind of an odd morality that we're talking about here. Education is, if you're not nice to other people, then you can be responsible for their deaths. And I don't think that that is the right message that should be sent.
I see what you mean. In a way, we all share the blame. What are we going to do about it?
What are you, dear viewer, going to do about the children who are like Cliff?
What can we do?
Maybe a little attention, a little love.
They seem to answer the question themselves. Now, here we have a funeral in Utah in 1974, and it's done by a Catholic priest with a collar. I think that is not likely. Now, after a death, a funeral typically takes place within a week or perhaps 2 weeks at most. So I don't understand how a coroner's report, which should have included a toxicology workup, could have already been filed. Now, as we see a casket in the scene, Cliff, he was not cremated, which would have fixed the timeline issue. Now, Cliff, he never again appears in another LDS production. So the filmmakers cement his disappearance in this film by never calling upon him again. The stepdad, he's not there. And it does not appear to me that the biological father was there either, because there was only just a few students. And the principal is not there. What happened to the delegation from the school promised by the principal? This was a very flimsy delegation, if there was one at all. So this is a final failure of the adults in Cliff's tragic but short life. Now, in a small Utah town of around 900 people in the early 1970s, it is not a stretch to imagine that most of the town would turn out for a sudden tragic death of a 13-year-old that was witnessed by 50 people. If you read the actual story, all of the kids in the school are talking about Cliff on the day that he died. This is big news. In fact, it would have been one of the biggest stories of the year. The principal said he was going to put an article into the town's paper.
Excuse me, are you Mr. Collier?
Yes, I am. Why?
Well, I was wondering if I could talk to you for a minute.
Look, son, I have a lot on my mind right now. Could we make it some other time?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. What did you say your name was?
My name is Leroy Jones, and I'm going to be in your math class next spring.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if you could give me some help.
At that moment, I resolved never to forget Cliff Evans. He'll be my challenge from now on. Each September, as I look at the unfamiliar faces, I'll look for veiled eyes in an alien world. I've promised myself I may not do anything else for them, but not one of them is going to come out of my class a nobody, a zero.
You never hear anything nice whatsoever said about Cliff during the entire movie. Not even here in the final moments before his internment. Not really at any time in his life. The best sentiment about the boy actually comes from his mother during Mr. Collier's visit, when she says, quote, "He's not dumb," end quote. And that is hardly a compliment. I love the boy's name at the end of the film, Leroy. That is a good Mormon name if I've ever heard one, which brings me to the point that there's no mention of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and no mention of Mormons in the film. Now, from Miser's story, we read, as quote, "We couldn't find 10 students in the school who had known Cliff well enough to attend the funeral as his friends." In her story, the funeral is at church, but the filmmakers chose an even bleaker setting than being at church. In short, God, he is never mentioned in Cliff's life. And by striking the church setting from God is abandoning Cliff Evans in death, because it's not at the church. This film is really, really great for analysis. First of all, what is a cipher? Everyone knows that a cipher is a zero, but it's also a secret, a disguised way of writing a code. In some ways, Cliff is a secret. No one knows Cliff's mind but him. No one penetrated it. He has no friends, no one to confide in. He's he's cryptic. So it's a double entendre here between Cliff amounting to nothing, being a zero, and the fact that he's an enigma. A lot of this film is based on the Pygmalion effect. The filmmakers and the writer are bringing us this film based on the Rosenthal effect, also known as the Pygmalion effect. Now, I'm going to read this all to you because this really helps understand what this is all about. It's a psychological phenomenon in which high expectations lead to improved performance in a given area. The effect is named for the Greek myth of Pygmalion, the sculptor who fell so much in love with the perfectly beautiful statue he created that the statue came to life. The psychologists Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson, in their book Pygmalion in the Classroom, borrowed something of the myth by advancing the idea that teachers' expectations of their students affect the students' performance, a view that has been called into question as a result of later findings. Now, Rosenthal and Jacobson held that high expectations lead to better performance and low expectations leads to worse, both effects leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy. According to the Pygmalion effect, the targets of the expectations internalize their positive labels, and those with positive labels succeed accordingly. A similar process works in the opposite direction in the case of low expectations. The idea behind the Pygmalion effect is that increasing the leader's or a teacher's expectation of a follower's performance will result in better follower performance. Within sociology, the effect is often cited with regard to education and social class. That is exactly what is taking place here. If you read this particular study, magnitude of teacher expectancy effects on pupil IQ, basically what they're saying is that it doesn't have a big effect as one would imagine. There's also another analysis that I want to bring to bear on this, and that's from The Mind, Self, and Society. Now, this is a book based on the teachings of American sociologist George Herbert Mead's published book in 1934. Now, George H. Mead, in this book that was published posthumously, shows a psychological analysis through behavior and interaction of an individual's self with reality. The behavior is mostly developed through sociological experiences and encounters. These experiences lead to individual behaviors that make up the social factors that create the communications in society. Communication can be described as the comprehension of another individual's gestures. Mead explains that communication is a social act because it requires two or more people to interact. He also explains that the self is a social process with communication between the I, the pure form of self, and the me, which is the social form of the self. I becomes a response to the me and vice versa. That same I deals with the response of an individual, and the me is considered the attitudes you take on, both being related to social selves. We saw the I of Cliff very clearly in one scene where he is talking about the frog, the beautiful poem on the frogs. Sorry, that's a tough scene for me. That's the I of Cliff. That is his true, pure form of self. However, there's also a me form of self that Herbert Mead postulates in his book. The me form is the social form, and it's constructed by what the response to other people, your environment around you. So we're seeing a dichotomy in this film of the me, which is the labels that people put onto Cliff, and his negative interactions with other conflicted with his I, which is his pure self, which is that little beautiful boy. They showed us this movie in health class when I was a kid, and when I was a kid in high school. It was laughably outdated style-wise, but I've never forgot this movie. Half the class was crying, thanks for posting it. Having been one of the slow kids in school, I can't emphasize enough the true value of caring and a patient teacher. And finally, I'm 56, and I remember seeing this film in the 70s. It was new then, and for more than 45 years, I've remembered it. Had anyone really known me, they would have seen that I was a Cliff. I say Cliff because I'm certain that there were more Cliffs out there just like me. The overwhelming reception to this film has been positive. So let me give you some personal thoughts on my conclusion. There's a lot of people who want to mock this movie. I want to treasure it. Now, obviously, there's some aspects of the short that are a little far-fetched, and the moral of the movie to its logical consequence, which I don't think is a good step to take. If in some ways seems to be saying, if I'm not kind to others, they will die and I will be responsible. So that's not the lesson that I want to take from the film. Although from a plain viewing of the movie, I understand that some people do take away from it, and I understand that. But I remember watching this film as a young boy at church. I did think that some of the parts were a little cheesy. The message of the short left me wanting to be a better person. I mean, I too experienced divorce and significant family trials as a youth, and perhaps that's one reason that I connect so strongly with Cliff. Now that I'm older and a former public school teacher who taught some potential ciphers in the snow, I also find myself very sympathetic to Frank. Now, I think that this film delivers a powerful and emotionally competitive narrative, and I mean, the film has a real sticking power. If you look past the film's minor shortcomings to the timeless kernel of universal message of kindness to others, the cipher in the snow, it will not leave you out in the cold. Thanks so much for joining me to review this film. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and join us next time for another episode of the Mormon Movie Reviews, where LDS movie lovers belong. So long.